My name's Thasnima and I'm here to share with you our final project, Swaps Are Us. Now, in the UK, every year 8.5 million new perfectly good toys are thrown away because parents and caregivers don't have the space to store them, like me. Now, what we've decided to make is a toy swapping website for parents and caregivers in local communities. This is a place where you can upload unused and unloved toys that you haven't got space for and borrow toys from others. So the website will allow you to create a profile, search for toys in your local area, and borrow toys instead of buying. This is to help encourage sustainability in the toy industry. Borrow, play, and repeat. So for our backend technologies, we used Express.js as an extension of Node.js to create our API endpoints. As a database to integrate with this, we used PostgreSQL, and as a tool to interact with the database, we chose to use SQLize. That's because it's a little bit more flexible with the models where you can update them later quite easily as we integrated new features and different members of the team added to the backend. For user authentication, such as login, logout, and creating profiles, we used Firebase. Other tools we used were Docker to run the containers, Postman to test our API endpoints. We created RESTful APIs and use Git and GitHub for version control and to work together as a team on the project. So you can see here we've got our backend application. And here I'm just on the app.js file, which has all the Express app and the API endpoints for user and for toy. And we've got here post, get, and delete for each one. And we've got our middlewares here. We can then go on to see where our controllers are kept in a separate file. So here we've got the code for the controllers. So for creating a toy, and then we went on to be able to create a toy by user ID, and then how to retrieve those toys, which these are the APIs we'll then use in the Browse Toys section. And we've got the same for user as well. In our models, you can see how we've used SQLize to specify which data types will be used for both toy and user, and then we specified things such as for the ID, for it to auto-increment so we didn't have to add it, and for it to be the primary key for the toy. For user, similar type of schema, and then we can also even specify the length of the email address to be a certain number of characters, and that it has to be a certain structure, so it has to be actually like an email address. For our tests, we used mock data to test that the API endpoints did work. So for our front end, the technology we decided to use was React, including React Router. The reason we chose this is that it's an easy-to-use JavaScript library. It has lots of flexible functionality. There's a great online community if you need help. And it allows you to create reusable components such as alerts, sidebar, navbar, and buttons, so you're not repeating code over and over again. We used test-driven development, and the testing packages we used were Jest and React Testing Library. And to fetch data from our backend API, we used the Axios package.
Hello, my name is Lisa. Today, I'm going to begin by showing you some of the front-end components that we used to build the application. I'm going to start off by looking through the navbar component, and the reason for this is because we used a single-page application. We have the navbar displayed at the top of the page at all times to be able to navigate through our application. You can see here that we've used the link to the About Us, the Browse Toys, the Add Toys, and the Profile. And we can also use the Register and Login, which we've used Firebase for. We've used some code here so that if the user is logged in, we can see the user details. So we'll be able to see our profile and login page after that. We've also added a basic form component. So from that component, we'll be able to upload toys. So here you can see that we've used the handle add toys function to do this. And we've also added an alert if it's successful. Once the toys are uploaded, they'll be shown on the toys page. which you can see here. And within this, we've added some filtering components so that we can filter by category, condition, and age range. I'm going to now show you the application on the browser. So whenever we initially open it, you can see here that we have the mobile view. So we've styled it with CSS to be able to render it as a mobile friendly version when we use a smaller browser. When we navigate into the bigger browser, we can see here that the nav bar will now cover the width of the screen. I've brought us onto the login page first to show you how we can log into our account. So if we select login, we're able to go through then to our profile page, so it automatically brings us in. I'm going to just show an example of how we would add a toy. So for example, if we want to add a book, we can add a book. The type of book, the category type, which is going to be books. Condition is like new. Age range is 6 to 9. We can do a description as storybooks for children, a borrow period, a postcode, and we can upload an image. And there, now you can see that the item has been added successfully. If I try to add while the form is empty, I'll get an error message where it says, please fill out all required fields. So it will only allow me to add in a toy if there's data attached to it. That will go into my Browse Toys section. So when I open this up, you can see all of the listed toys. As they're linked to the user ID, I'll be able to delete the toys that I've uploaded. And I can also see other toys here which have been added by other users. And if I like them, I can add a love heart to them. On the left hand side is my filter bar. So you can see here that I can filter by type. So I can select filter by books and I can clear my filter. I can also filter by condition and I can filter by age range, which would allow me to be able to see specific results for what I'm looking for. Finally, as well, I'll be able to go to my About Us page. This would be usually the landing page of the web page. So here you can access the Browse Toys section and also upload toys. Once I've finished, I can log out of my account. And as well, you can see then whenever a new user comes in, they're able to register like so. I'm now going to pass over to Abby, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the Firebase backend and some of the difficulties that we faced when creating this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I will begin by showing a bit of our Firebase code and how we applied authentication context to all the relevant components. So after we've imported all of our relevant packages and components, we then defined an initial state object using name, email, password, and area as for fields. And here we've used the useState hook for the fields and alert component. We've also created a handle sign up function, and this will call on the create user with email and password from Firebase and then authenticate the field email and field password. This will then be posted to our backend in our users, including the user UID. And here we have our authentication context. So here we will create our context and then we will export our use auth. And this will be imported into all of our other components. And we've also then wrapped our authentication provider around our children. I will now discuss some of the agile tools we used during the development of our website. So we decided early on that we would follow the same routine we had followed during the course. So we had stand up around twice a week for each of us to discuss what we were working on and how we were generally getting on with building our codes. We also had regular sprint planning meetings through Slack messaging where we would decide what to work on next upon completion of a task. And on the weekends, we would have a team review so we could all demonstrate what each of us had done. If retrospectively there were any issues, we would all participate in more programming together to try and resolve any issues. I will now discuss some of the problems and challenges we faced. In terms of Firebase, none of us in the team had any experience using it before. So for the first few days, we struggled a bit in connecting the front-end auth with our customized backend. We eventually managed to sort it out by adding an extra endpoint which linked directly to the user account. Another issue we had was with GitHub. After creating the repository and cloning it, we initially started pushing our work onto that main. As you can imagine, that caused a bit of a headache, and so we resolved that by creating branches that we could work on. And that concludes our presentation. We would like to thank all the tutors at Manchester Coding. Honestly, you've all been great. And finally, specifically with this project, we want to thank Maria, Whitney, and Rabia. Thank you.